sub-agenda for the reentry update. And we'll turn it back to Dr. Bouquet.
Thank you, Mr. Natali. We're going to talk a little bit about, and I asked Mr. Neese to keep this brief, but some of the plans that his staff has planned for students with IEPs and 504s and the additional supports that we're going to offer. And I put accommodations there. That probably wasn't the best word. It probably should say supports, because accommodations are a product of an IEP. But these are just some additional supports that we want our special ed aides and our teachers to be assisting students with during this first month of school at least. Keith?
Thank you, Dr. Kincaid. I will try to keep it brief, but as you can see, there's a lot of information on this document. Just one thing to keep in mind, special education is a whole different ballgame, especially in a remote learning phase. It has many obstacles and challenges, but I am confident in our team of teachers and our team of aides to meet the needs of our, not only our special education students, but our students with 504 plans as well during a remote learning phase. Just some bullet points to just cover. A video was sent out last week to on Schoology addressing just some overview of information for parents for special education and 504 plans. I will be sending out a letter next week as well. Since the video has been sent out, actually even prior to the video, I've had several meetings and follow-up conversations with parents over the last month, and several just in the last 2 weeks, and I have some scheduled already in the next couple of weeks as well. Some of my teachers, some of my special education teachers have already started reaching out to parents to introduce themselves and to make them aware that they are their child's special education teacher or overseer of their 504 plan. We've also had some voluntary staff special ed meetings. That includes all my special education teachers. We have several professionals that serve our kids from the intermediate unit. They have been invited to all those meetings as well. We've had 2. We have another one coming up on Thursday. It's just a way for us to bounce ideas off each other, just so everyone's in the loop. Sometimes my teachers have great ideas, and they're able to share with other members of the staff as well. We do have 4 new special education teachers. We do have virtual meet and greets set up. Our 2 new speech and language pathologists, we have a meet and greet set up for next it's August 18th. We'll do that through Google Meets. I sent out a link tonight to parents, and that'll be a chance for parents who have students with speech and language in their IEP, a way for them to meet that therapist, or actually in our case, both therapists. The following night, we will have a meet and greet, virtual again through Google Meets, for parents to meet the new autistic support teacher in the middle school and the new learning support teacher in our elementary school. I did add, we've always had, since I've taken over in this position, a website with parent resources. I add to that. It's an ongoing document that I just continue to add, and then when I add a substantial amount, I usually push out a message on Schoology that parent resources have been added to our website. I did add that same document or that same folder to Schoology, so there's a parent resource folder and the Fairview School District resources page on Schoology as well. And then just one other thing to understand, that no matter whether you're in a remote learning phase or you're coming back in a normal phase, there's always an expectation of our special education staff and teachers to inform all general education teachers of what students they have in their class that have IEPs and 504 plans, and then also to provide some type of snapshot of that document. That will happen just as if it would happen in a face-to-face learning phase. I'm just going to jump down before I go through daily schedule communication and things like that, because because I think what's really important here is just to understand that special education is individualized. So you heard daily schedules from all the buildings today. My teachers will still follow those, but it may look a little different. You might see more small group instruction going on. You might see more one-on-one type support or instruction going on during those time periods. Everything is based on what the need of the student in that class is, or in some cases, they can group 2 or 3 kids together. So to say my teachers will get on and do instruction for 30 minutes to the whole group is probably not going to happen, because those kids with IEPs just wouldn't learn best in that type of format. So what you might see is it is an expectation that there is face-to-face interaction every day, every class period for my special education teachers. It just might be in different segments for different groups of kids and things like that. Some other things to consider is there are some groups of students or individual students who just may not do well in a remote learning phase. So what happens then? Well, we have to provide options, and we have to document those options. An option may be packet work. I know in our high school life skills classroom, she has put together binders for all of her kids with some packet work for them to do daily. And then she would follow up with them with Google Meets to offer feedback and discussion and things like that, rather than having those students sit in front of an iPad and get direct instruction, where that may be quite difficult for our life skills or even our autism support population. So an option in that case would be some packet work. Another option would be instead of tests and assessments or quizzes, maybe a student completes a project to demonstrate their knowledge rather than taking an online type of test. Other things, modifications is a big thing, or accommodation. So some students might need substantial modifications to a science class that they're participating in. So the general education teacher and our special education teacher, along with our classroom aides, will work together to, maybe they only have to do 3 assignments rather than 5. Maybe those 3 assignments look quite different than what their non-disabled peers may be doing. That's not the case for all students, but there are some students who will need substantial modifications and accommodations to be successful in a remote learning phase. Students with 504 plans, where they have accommodations outlined in their plans so they can access the general education curriculum. So such things, they might get extended time or small group testing, tests read aloud, daily check-ins with the special education teacher. Those are all things that can still take place in a remote learning phase. And those are all things that my teachers know that are still expected to make happen. My aides, the aides that we have 24 aides in our district. Those aides will still report to the special education teachers' classrooms, and they will develop a schedule to support the students that they normally support. So that could be maybe they check in with email. I know they made some phone calls last year. Maybe the teacher sets up a Google Meet session for them to work with a couple of kids while the teacher works with a couple of kids, and then they can switch. So the aides are still going to be expected to support our students in a remote learning phase. So those are just some things, some items to understand. I'm going to jump back up to the daily schedule. Like I said before, our teachers will follow their normal day-to-day schedule outlined by whatever the building presented tonight. Our aides will follow their daily schedule and support the students based on guidance from their special education teacher. And that's protocol that takes place whether we're in a remote phase or a face-to-face type environment. That happens at the beginning of every school year. Communication is probably the biggest thing that I stress with our teachers and our aides, especially in a remote. We stress it in a face-to-face environment. We really stress the importance of it in a remote learning phase, that they have to be available. Our teachers and aides have to be available. What does that mean? They can support students through Google Meets, maybe set up some one-on-one small group learning opportunities outside of what that typical maybe language arts block would be or anything like that. Emails, Schoology messaging. We put our teachers and aides, we can assign them as advisors in every student on their caseload. So let's say a learning support teacher has 20 kids on their caseload. And some of those kids are going to be out, actually all of them, at some point will be in the general education classroom. So we can assign the aides that work with those students and also the teachers that work with those students as advisors in those students' courses. So then that teacher and aide can always know, number one, how the student's doing, and number two, what activities and assignments are being assigned during that day or that week or things like that. We did that in the spring, and that was effective for a lot of our students who are pushed out in the general education classroom for most of their school day. IEPs and 504 meetings, those will take place virtually to start the year through Google Meets. The way that works is parents will get a formal invitation in the mail, just like they would always for an IEP or 504 meeting. I have drafted a letter to go along with that invitation, just explaining the meeting will take place through a virtual platform, and then just some important information to understand during that meeting. I am able to project the document on the screen. My teachers are expected to send home a rough draft either a day or two before the meeting, so parents actually have it in their hands to review during the meeting. And then once the meeting is conducted and everything is finished, I will send home copies to the parents for them to sign and send back to our district. That worked in the spring. I think we had maybe 54 meetings, and we got 53 of the paperwork. I'm missing one, but 53 of the parents signed and sent back, and everything went quite well. Another item is we do have related services, so our speech, and then our OT and PT, which is occupational therapy and physical therapy. Those are contracted out through the IU. So is our deaf and hard of hearing services. We have 3 or 4 kiddos who receive that. That's an IU teacher. And then we have a couple students with vision IEPs. That's an IU teacher as well. They've been really good this summer at participating in our staff meetings. They were super in the spring as well. But all of those services will be through teletherapy to start the year. We did that in the spring. It worked. We did it through Google Meets. The teachers worked with the parents to set those sessions up, and they would send a link out to conduct those sessions through Google Meets. There are a couple kiddos that they don't do well on Google Meets. What we did for those is we sent some packets home for them to work on, and then followed up with either email or phone call to provide some feedback and things like that. Our evaluation process with Mrs. Heverly. So this would be for students who are not in special education yet, but may be struggling, and we still plan on having our support teams and our SAT teams remain in place. So as students come up and may need to be tested to figure out if they are eligible for special education services and programming, we still are going to keep those evaluations in place face-to-face. We've done some this summer. Mrs. Heverly has a shield I purchased that sits between her and the student. It has a little space on the bottom where she can push documents through. We do have some paperwork that the parents have to sign off on about travel and symptoms and things like that. I think we've done maybe 4 or 5 this summer, and she has maybe 3 or 4 others planned, and they've gone well. We have reached out, and a couple parents have just said they're not comfortable with coming face to face. Just that's fine. They just remain. That document just remains open to testing, but we do plan on continuing with our evaluation. We do have 5 students from our life skills program at our high school that will be attending the transition center this year at ECTS. This is actually a separate program. It targets our students with severe cognitive disabilities. We have 5 this school year. They will still attend as long as that program is going to have face-to-face learning. Transportation will be set up from our district to provide transportation for those students to and from each day. The nice thing about that, for the month of September, it's a really nice program. It's a quality program for our life skill students. So it gets them out of the house, involved in good type of learning for them to start the year. I've also been working with our teachers to add some supplemental programs because, face-to-face or remote learning sometimes just, like I said, doesn't work for our students with disabilities and that population. So the Bureau of Special Ed partnered with the intermediate unit to provide free subscriptions to something called the Unique Learning System, News to You. So basically, it's a program, it's a cloud-based online platform for reading and math, and it targets students with complex learning needs. Or it targets really our autistic support classrooms, our life skills classrooms, and our students with learning disabilities that may be 2 or 3 years below level, up to about 6th grade, because I think the reading level caps out at about 4th grade. So that's going to be in place. We've had teachers attend 2 trainings through the IU already, and we have another training coming up on Wednesday that we're going to do in-house, because I've had 2 teachers already use the program. One being Mrs. Jackson in our life skills room, so she's able to provide some in-home training for our teachers. So that will be an additional platform that we'll be able to use. Reading A to Z is already in place. It's just an online platform. That's already in place at our elementary school. MobiMax is an online learning solution to help target weak skills. It has differentiated learning options. It has some interactive games that can be used as a supplemental program. I am going to purchase that for our teachers. And then something called Raz Kids Plus is a comprehensive learning platform that uses level books, kind of focuses on comprehension a little more. So maybe for upper middle school students who struggle with comprehension and things like that. That'll be another supplemental program our teachers will be able to push out for certain students. So my message to them was the more tools and resources they have, the more things they would be able to offer our students with disabilities, rather than just Google Meet instruction and Schoology assignments. I think our students, with IEPs need a little bit more. Some may use some of those, some may use all of them, some may not use any of those, but the more tools that we have, the better. If parents, I've had conversations with Mrs. Bryant before about this. If there are parents out there who have concerns, or even it's middle of September and you get a conversation with someone that their child has an IEP and they're struggling, please, parents need to reach out to me. There's not a student that we won't work with or accommodate or modify or change things to help them succeed in this type of learning. And we would do that in a face-to-face type learning situation as well. But when I don't know things, I'm under the assumption that things are going well. Parents can reach out. It's going to be a positive conversation to help their child. That's what special education is. It's individualized, it's changing, it's adjusting, it's modifying, it's accommodating. But I need to know those things if students are struggling. And then the last thing you can just see our current numbers in the district. All the way down, Justin. We have about 205 students with IEPs to start the year. We're about 73 with 504 plans. Next board meeting, I am going to do a little presentation on our cyclical monitoring. That has wrapped up, it's finished. So we're good for another 5 years. I'm going to present how we did and the results. Just so you know, we did extremely well. The lady who was in charge of conducting our monitoring said it was one of her best 3 she's ever conducted. So that's a credit to our teachers. We have wonderful teachers. They really did a nice job of making sure paperwork's up to date. Things are in place following the processes that are in place of protocols. We got really high reviews from our monitoring. I'm proud of the teachers for I'll present on that next board.
In the spring, I think that there was some deliveries and stuff sometimes. Like, so if you have a student who's in life skills,
Yeah.
who's not in the transition program, but you have some that might just, the papers aren't going to cut it, the iPads aren't going to cut it, they need tactiles, they need to work on fine motor. So are we going to deliver things to those kids, or
Yeah,
how?
so I'm just thinking of a couple students last year that didn't do well with packets or with any type of remote learning. So I'm thinking of one student where the parent asked for certain resources or materials and the teacher provided that. Yes, so if parents need things, I'll leave that up to judgment by my teachers first. The teachers will work with the parents to determine what students need certain things in their classroom. And if they need me to purchase things or get things, I'm willing to do that. But the teacher will work with the parent first to decide what type of instruction is best for that student.
Anything else for Keith? Thank you, Keith. Folks, the return to school metrics, keep in mind, this came out today. So, you know, we haven't had a whole lot of time to digest this information. We were working on something, I think it was, Works.
Camp Hill had it.
Oh, Camp Hill.
Yeah, it's just the district.
Yeah, so Camp Hill came out with some suggested metrics that they were going to go from, and they must have had a heads up from the state because the state's metrics ended up looking very similar. So we got an email about noon today that basically said these are recommendations, just like everything that we've been getting from PDE and the Department of Health. They're not mandates, but the recommendations for sort of a guide based on the number of positive cases in your county and the number of positive test results, one or the other. And so with that information, there were 3 categories: a low, a moderate, and a high in terms of risk. We looked through the counties, 64 counties, in Pennsylvania, 67 counties in Pennsylvania. I was an English teacher. And there weren't any that were high risk. There were several that were moderate, is where we fell, and there were a bunch that were low. I know that Warren, the cases in Warren are very, very low. The cases in Bradford, for example, McKean County, are very low. So, well, here you go. Here's our where we fall in that moderate category. And Justin, I didn't see the link to the PDE site, but
I don't have it.
yeah, what it says here is that that these are recommendations to schools determining the instructional model, and so the low category would be fewer than 10 cases per 100,000 residents. 10% of one hundred
Well,
thousand.
that is fewer than 10 per 100,000 per day.
Per day.
Over the last 7 days.
As taking a 7-day average, yeah.
To be in the low, you need that under 10, and you need a less than 5% positivity rate. We fall into that moderate with a lot of other counties, which is 10 to 100, or at 5 to 10% positivity rate. And it's one or the other. So for us, we did the math. We think that we're actually under that 10 for the incidence rate, but we're above the 5% for the positivity rate. So that might be good news for us moving forward, because the positivity rate can certainly decline. We think more people will be tested, right? Moving forward here, we assume that more people will be tested especially once school gets back into session. So with that though, under the recommended instructional models, when you're in the moderate, there are one of two options they recommend: a blended model, which would be our hybrid, right? Or full remote learning model, which is what we're proposing, what we're doing. So I think we're there based on the recommendations. I think that we've landed where we should be. One or the other, blended or full remote. And that's why, Fran, I go back to, if we stay where we are, the transition makes most sense for it to be a hybrid based on these recommendations. If we're going to truly follow Department of Health recommendations, that's where we should be. Luke, I know you studied these numbers a little bit better than I did. Anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, the one thing I would say is I've been looking at our 7-day average since the beginning of July, and it is steadily increasing each 7 days and, each day. I was looking more at the 14-day average because I thought that was more appropriate, but then this came out with 7-day. But if you track our 14-day average, it increases every day. Every day our 14-day average goes up. So, we're hopeful. We're hoping that those numbers can come down, and really we're looking at that positivity rate. So with increased testing, and as long as we don't increase our number of positive cases with that increased testing, then we should see that positivity rate go down, which would get into that level category.
Is there any accommodation for zip code in these recommendations? Is the basic element is the county?
It's the county.
Yeah, it's just county.
Yeah, it's the county, which I think is fair, Alan, because not everyone who comes to this building every day lives in one of our zip codes, particularly the adults. I mean, most of the students, 99% of the students live in the zip code, but a lot of the adults live outside of it.
But a lot of the presenters last meeting highlighted our low infection rate in our community. So it's not, like you say, it's not completely the full picture. You account for transportation people, teachers especially, support
And
staff,
students' parents too,
as well as
who are
parents.
working, all have an account.
Okay.
And you want to dinner and lunch at the mall. And then
Or have parents with their children in two households.
So I like this as a metric mainly because it's a recommended from the Department of Health. And I think that you could say, a governor's recommendation. I think Matt made this point today. One could argue that a governor, whether it be our governor or Ohio's governor, Democrat versus Republican, could be a political recommendation. I think one could argue that. I'm not suggesting that. But I don't think you could argue that the Department of Health is that. I think the Department of Health in every state is meant to stay neutral and give you the facts. So I think it's safe, and Jim, I know this is more your area. I think it's safe that we use this as a guide for a metric guide for us in determining our instructional model.
So what will we use if we had to go backward at some point in time? Would we just wait for a recommendation from the state, or would we look at this and say, oh, now we would look at the guidelines and just say, okay, on Monday, we better go remote, and we've been hybrid.
So if you look at that list that we had up there of all the counties, nobody is high right now, even though there are some counties that have lot of cases. But this threshold to get this substantial is pretty high. You'd have to be in really bad shape. I would imagine that maybe Florida and Arizona are there, but to go backwards where the recommendation is full remote, nothing else. Luke, do you want to touch on that? Because the number of cases are pretty high for us.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to look at like, 270 cases per day. So in Perry County's up to 270 cases per day, then I think we're all going to be sheltering in place.
Yeah, they're probably
I mean,
won't
that's
be
just a
in.
guess.
Yeah.
But
This information coming out today, this isn't much different from our previous meeting. We had our previous meeting was on the 29th, I think, and we had some fresh information from PD on the 26th. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from parents, and I know that all of you have as well. And a lot of the feedback that we've gotten and a lot of the questions and concerns are completely legitimate. I agree with their arguments and their comments. The one thing that I would take a little exception to, though, is the notion that we're lacking in transparency. We're sharing. There's nothing held back here. I mean, nothing is a secret. And I think that people have to account for the timeliness of some of this information that we get. We got this today. So, and just to kind of give you an example of the way information is flowing from the state. We're giving it to you as quickly as we get it. Nothing held back here. I like this as a guide. I don't know why we wouldn't follow the Department of Health guidelines and recommendations. I think that we should, and this is one.
Could we expect guidelines from, say, multiple sources, Department of Health, Department of Education, on a metric for the school district, though? I mean, if you have a percentage of children that become infected, a percentage of staff that become infected, I'm not talking necessarily about zip codes, I'm talking about right in the buildings.
Yeah.
Is there going to be guidance on, hey, when you reach a 1% infection rate in your school, then you should shut down or over months?
So what we've been told, Alan, all along is that guidance is going to come from the Department of Health. So here's an example I heard
As
of.
of August 10th, we still don't have.
Well, they're doing our contact tracing right now. They're going to be making those recommendations. They've been making those recommendations all along the summer for not only schools but also businesses that have cases within their business. I heard on the news today that the school in Georgia that has the large outbreak, they're shutting down for 2 days. They're closing school for 2 days. That's it. So all those positive cases, and they're doing a deep clean for 2 days and keeping people isolated, and then they're bringing them back to school. That doesn't sound like what our Department of Health would recommend. We're looking at more at 14-day quarantines after situations like that. But we've also been told, and I said this before, that if there is an outbreak in a school, whether it be our school or another school, they're not necessarily shutting down the whole district, and they're not necessarily shutting down the whole building. It might be a wing, it might be a grade level, it might be a classroom. So, but that's coming right now from the Department of Health. What we're told. We don't have any kind of guideline otherwise.
So I know we're depending on the Department of Health to give us direction, but we written our own process and procedure in-house to say, this is who you call. You just found out you're a teacher that your spouse is infected. Who do they call? Let them know, or they come back positive, or kid, or whatever. I mean, I know we're meeting a lot of the health department, and I think that's reasonable. But we still need our own internal processes to say this is the process every teacher should follow based on direct impact, indirect impact, etc.
Yeah, and that's in our health and safety plan, Mr. Honey, and we have fielded a lot of questions like that throughout the summer. They call them contact of a contact, a close contact. We had one of our volunteers for one of our extracurriculars had a family member at an event that tested positive, but they weren't in close contact with that family member, so they didn't necessarily qualify as a close contact. Where we have someone in our support staff who's a summer employee who was at an outing with a family member, they were in close contact with that family member. So that individual has been quarantined and will continue to stay quarantined for 14 days. So we're asking them to communicate that with us so that we can help them make that call. But in a lot of cases, they already have that information because the person who tested positive is informing the Department of Health. The Department of Health is doing that contact tracing. They're contacting the people that were close contact. So a lot of times when we have that discussion, they've already had it, but we're involved. And fortunately, as I mentioned before, they've really relaxed the HIPAA guidelines, and the Department of Health is sharing a lot more information with us because that the threat of community spread is more important than they've determined in some of the HIPAA guidelines.
And is that you, is that head nurse, who is asking to say they're sharing?
Me, because we had to identify a pandemic coordinator in our health and safety plan, so that's me. When the Department of Health calls, they're calling me. I've spoken with the Department of Health on two different cases in the district, but we have more than that. We have 4 or 5 that I'm aware of that were either a contact or a close contact.
I'm sorry. Now that I'm hearing what you're saying about the possibility of going back, most likely, I just want to make sure, I didn't get to write it up, I just wrote a sentence to you really quickly. I had the opportunity to have a closed audience with Dr. Anthony Fauci, and so I could ask questions, he could answer me, so could this whole group of people. I was through Harvard Medical School. Obviously, I didn't understand the medical part, but I hung in tight on the science. The one thing they went from, though, was that originally they were talking to physician researchers. They're now looking to physicists who are dealing with particulates. And they're saying 6 feet is actually a minimum. They're looking out to 15 at this point. So if we're coming back and they're only going to close down a wing or something like that, in some of our rooms, the windows aren't working. Ventilation, I think, is going to be an issue, especially if we're keeping the children in here, which is what seems to be likely, very likely, yes.
Some of the high school don't have windows at all.
Yeah, all good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was a minimum.
So,
I agree.
Eric, do we run any risk like the Erie School District ran into with ventilation in our buildings? Are we similar to them?
No, we're actually in good shape in terms of ventilation. Our systems work pretty well despite their age. That was a conversation John and I had. He's pretty confident that
our building is air conditioned. So they're designed with much more air turnover than a lot of the buildings.
They're saying that's a problem, though, because it's taking air from one room and moving it into another room.
But you need to bring the fresh air in, and that's what our
Fresh air in, yeah.
that's what our building is.
How did they do that? I'm sorry.
There's fresh air intakes.
I understand pretty
That's
much. You
great.
don't have to break it down too much, yeah.
So half the vents in the ceiling bring air up, half the other ones bring air from the outside.
They do come from the outside. Okay.
Yes.
Even in the middle school here.
In the middle school here, yeah, when you walk around, all those univents that are mounted, traditional classroom univentilator, that's the one big square thing that provides all the air. On the other side of that is the wall. On the other side of the wall, there's a big vent or grate. You'll see, and that's what draws the air right in from the outside. In the middle school, it's the only building where we've had complaints of grass cutting and also diesel fumes when all 20 buses go past on that side of the building. I will get some complaints of fumes from the buses. So there is outside air coming in.
And this is Erie, so what's the heating system seem like?
Here?
Does it also vent outward?
Yes, yeah, it's the same.
And bring it in, it's the
So
same
brings
system,
in,
okay.
just brings, that cold air runs across the heating coil, which forms the air, brings it into the room first.
Okay, thank you.
and there's a requirement for so much outside
Yeah.
air coming into our building. We would need Vince here to explain exactly what that is. So we're going to use that as our return to school metrics. I think most districts will probably adopt that since it's the recommendation from the Department of Health. I want to talk a little bit about internet connectivity because of all the questions, the 2 questions I've received more than any 2 others are, what am I going to do with internet? And what am I gonna do with childcare? And so both of those issues we're trying to help folks out. Internet connectivity, like I mentioned at the beginning, we have some hotspots that we're going to try. I did have a couple of community members reach out to me and ask me if I would assist in what Eric mentioned at the last meeting, that like a broadband kind of initiative. And I said, please let me know however we can help as a district. We'd certainly be able to rural broadband initiative. We'd be willing to get involved with that anyway, and I'm still waiting for some information on how we can support that. But we are going to try the hotspots. We've also started conversations, and this could kind of take care of two issues, the two that I just mentioned. We started conversations with the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, as well as a couple local camps, WLD Ranch and Camp Fitch. Camp Fitch is offering almost like a day camp experience for children, where they can come and they can do their schoolwork. They can bring their device. They have internet there. They can do their schoolwork for a small fee. They can stay for the day and have activities and lunch and all those sorts of things. WLD Ranch is looking at something similar to that to offer the community. Internet isn't as great, WLD. And I've started the conversations with these two churches nearby to offer something similar. We were looking at something along the lines of what I was calling an internet cafe, for lack of a better term, where kids could come in, the ones who don't have internet could come in, of course, social distance. They have, this Methodist church, I don't know if you've ever been in there, they have a ton of space in that building. I don't know if that was always a church, or maybe if it was I don't know what it was before that, but they have large classrooms in the second floor of that building. They have 4 or 5 large classrooms that could accommodate probably 15 students per class, larger than our classrooms. And there wouldn't be any other furniture there, so they could really spread the kids out. It would just need some supervision. So George and I have had a couple of long conversations about this topic. He has advised me to steer clear of the school being directly involved with providing supervision. But we are talking to some other folks about helping to make that happen at the church. The church can't necessarily just offer the program on their own because of the daycare certification stuff that they would have to go through. But there are some other avenues that we're exploring. Pastor Jack, if you know him, has been just incredibly helpful. He's a really amazing guy. He wants to support the community as much as he can. The church really wants to help. So that could be an option for parents.
The district cover the costs associated with those.
I wanted to until.
How about the Fairview School Foundation?
Right. That might be an option. That might be an option. Yeah. Yeah. I tell you what I wanted to do.
Scholarships that they can pay.
What I wanted to do was send an AmeriCorps volunteer or two down there to supervise, so that they could be a tutor of sorts, and they could facilitate the students doing their work. We would break up the rooms into different age categories. This would be very limited seating, by the way. I mean, we still have to social distance and be responsible. But the risk of, and what that allows, if we were to do that, that allows the church, that's an out for the church, by the way, according to Pastor Jack. That's an out for the church because now it's an extension of the school. So if we send personnel down there, and the AmeriCorps are our personnel volunteers, right? But if we send them down there, it now becomes an extension of the school district, and it's not a church run operation. So they don't have to have the same certificates and certifications in place. The problem, though, is that if we do that, they want to be a rider on our insurance, and that's where the lawyers start getting a little heartburn in that. So, especially
School safety regulations, so that also apply.
that would be an issue. The school safety stuff, the Act 44 stuff, that would become an issue if it was school sanctioned. That's why I'm looking at some other avenues right now. Pastor Jack gave me some options. Without getting too specific, there are some ways to make this happen without the school directly supporting it financially. But the foundation is a a great thought, Jim.
I see the foundation, entering into the use agreement, church, providing scholarships for children that can't afford the day camps and fees. And then staffing it with, parent volunteers that have their clearances.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty easy formula, really.
Yeah. So we're working on that. We have a couple of other thoughts, kind of in our back pocket. We're waiting to see, we want to have a really good feel for who truly doesn't have internet access at home. We're not talking about providing childcare per se from the school district standpoint, but we do want to provide, internet capabilities to families. So we have a couple of things that we're working on. I'm pretty confident at the end of the day, any family in Fairview that does not have internet will have internet opportunities provided to them by September 1st, one way or another.
You know, it's also not just internet, but also wireless capabilities if they more than one child.
Correct.
They're gonna need that, and they're using iPads too.
Yeah.
So, you know, not just a single connection, and I don't know if that's what they're asked to take care of. Because a lot of them don't understand what they have, they just know that the computer works.
Yeah.
And then they only have one computer for the household, and it has a direct cable connection.
Yeah.
Won't really work for the iPads.
Yeah, Trent, you would know this better, being in IT, but even our hotspots can't accommodate more than a couple of devices on them. So if you have four kiddos in your home, one hotspot's not going to be enough.
Say one per computer.
Yeah.
Very foundation again.
Yeah, we have them, and we're getting more. So I am confident, and we have some people. I think at the end of the day, we're going to have about 25 or 30 students who do not have internet capability at home, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to find a way for them to have internet.
You should go get hotspots that have multiple connections.
Multiple.
On the same hotspot, you should be able to find something out.
Oh, really? Luke, what did you determine?
Well,
Ours
a
gonna
lot of
contact-
that depends, I mean, the device itself can connect multiple devices, it's the speed. So in certain areas, actually this weekend I drove around Fairview testing a couple of hotspots. So there's places where you could easily connect 4 or 5 devices and stream HD video and have no problem. There's other places where you're gonna struggle to connect one. And so that's more the concern. It all depends on, you know, where and most likely if they're a family that doesn't have good internet, you know, they probably don't have cable internet that can come to their homes. They're probably also going to have trouble with cell reception. So that's why we're trying to identify those families now and see what their true needs are.
And we talked to the library, the Fairview branch of the library, see what accommodations they could provide.
Yeah, they have a pretty robust internet wireless system down there. Are their doors open?
Yeah, they're open.
Are they open? I haven't seen any cars.
You can, in parking lot, use it as well. So
I saw that, Dave, but I haven't seen any cars there though.
You
So-
can go in.
Oh, can you go in? Okay.
no more tables and chairs or anything. You can't go sit down, but you can walk in with the folks.
Okay. Yeah, that might be another possibility for students. You know, we've been thinking about places like out in Gray, some of the other local establishments here that might be able to. It's just that it's going to be hard for kids to sit there for six or 7 hours, I think, in one of those places. But, we're working on that. That's something that's a goal of ours, obviously, is to get every kid on the internet so that they can do their work. Fall athletics. So last Friday, was it? Friday the PIAA met and they postponed the start of the fall season by 2 weeks. So what that means, I have this on my phone, what that means is that the first official practice for fall sports is August 31st. So right now, it's still preseason conditioning, and that hasn't stopped. So we have, band is up there, soccer, volleyball, football, tennis, cross country, golf. They're all doing preseason, it's more voluntary preseason workouts right now. Practice itself doesn't start until August 31st. You know, you probably saw the news today that the Big Ten is canceling football. Whether that could happen tomorrow, I think. We know that the PZAC is canceled. We know that the MAC conference is canceled. I can't imagine PIAA is not going to cancel fall sports. I really can't. All the school districts in Erie County right now, I can tell you, are taking a step back and wait approach. Nobody is initiating, hey, we're canceling fall sports yet. I think people really believe that PIAA is going to do that. I think the good news for us is that we have a little bit of a window to wait that out, because our next board meeting is on the 24th, and that's still before the start of fall sports. So my recommendation right now is to wait this thing out with fall sports. And again, if we see an improvement, things get better, maybe we can have fall sports. I don't believe I just have a hard time believing they're going to play football. That's the one that I still come back to. I just have a hard time believing that. But I think you could play tennis. I think you could run cross country. Soccer and football with a close contact at the end of the, I don't see how those two happen, but we'll see what happens. So my recommendation now, Lindsay's recommendation, is to give it these 2 weeks. That buffer really helps us in terms of our timing, and see where things go. We won't put a stop to any of the voluntary conditioning right now, and we'll hold off on making a call on first practice. The only thing we bump up against is heat acclimation for football. There's a mandatory, is that a 1 week? It's a mandatory 1 week heat acclimation for football, and that actually starts the week before the official kickoff for fall sports. That does start on our board meeting day, the 24th. So if for some reason on the 24th we make a decision, you make a decision, that's the board, as a function of the board to make that decision on sports, then we may have had one heat acclimation practice.
Will the practice cadence, voluntary practice cadence continue as it is now, the 1 week since 1 day a week? So that's going to continue.
That's up to the coaches.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
some are more
flexibility.
frequent.
Okay.
Yeah, tennis might be once a week, soccer's more often than that.
They're daily.
Daily, yeah. Basketball might be twice a day, and they're not even a fall sport.
So those coaches could have more practice if they want.
They could, yeah, that's up to the coach. Yep, based on their availability and space availability.
Okay, 2 quick questions. One, wasn't there a football game at least scheduled before August 31st when official practices? So are those delayed, those competitions?
Everything got pushed back 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, until official practices start, it's not considered that the season starts, right? So does that technically mean that all of the coaches, this is all volunteer time for the coaches?
For the coaches?
Yeah,
I
do
wouldn't call-
they get anything if the season doesn't start?
Well, that would be up to you. But we have said all along that we would make a recommendation to prorate their salaries in that case. Our coaches get 2 installments, 2 payments. One at halfway of the season and then one at the end of the season. So they've started for all intents and purposes, because summertime.
Like in July 1st?
Yeah, they've started. So we would make a recommendation, if fall sports get canceled, we would come back to the board with a recommendation to prorate their salaries. Yeah. Last year, we didn't have that choice.
Right.
Last year, we had to pay every employee.
Right.
But we don't think that'll happen. That was a state mandate. So that's the recommendation on fall athletics and all the anticipation. It's the debut of Mr. Bookhammer's directorial debut. This is a video, I put this on Schoology at the start of the meeting. So this is a video that's going out to all of our families. I think this doesn't drill down necessarily, like we talked about, but it gives you a nice overview of what remote learning is going to look like in all 3 buildings.
Ed, could you turn that volume up on the podium? I think it's down. I have the flags, it could be a real downer.
Welcome to the Fairview School District, the 2021 school year. As you know, we will be starting the year in a remote learning phase. This video will provide a small sample of what our instruction will look like during the first 30 days of school. Even in these challenging times, I trust that you will find our faculty and staff well prepared to offer the type of learning that the Fairview community has come to expect.
Good morning, class. Morning, Mrs. Britton. Let's take a look at what we're learning today. Click on week 1 folder, and today is Monday, so click on Monday folder to find all of our learning resources for the day. When we click on today's agenda, it'll talk about everything that you're going to be learning today. And today, we're going to be learning all about character traits. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to teach you what is a character trait, how to identify a character trait, and what activities to support a character trait. Then it's going to be your turn. We're going to read chapter 2 in Tales from the 4th Grade Nothing, and you are going to respond to me by identifying one character trait of Fudge and giving me 2 pieces of evidence from the text to support that character trait. The last thing that we're going to do today is move into our book groups. Are you ready to get started?
Okay, students, it's time to get started. I already marked everyone present if you joined me live for the meeting today. If you watch the video later, be sure to complete the activity that goes with our story so I can mark you present as well. If you still need extra time, just be sure to email me. Remember, you can always contact me if you have special circumstances. We understand and we're here to help.
Good morning. I'm so happy to see all your smiling faces. How is everyone feeling today? Today I'm going to share a book by one of my favorite authors, Eileen Spinelli. This book is called The Best Story.
So just like the main character in our story today, you're going to think of all of the stories that come from your heart. You're going to create what I call a heart map. And on this map, you're going to think of objects, hobbies, people, places, good memories, memories of things that happened to you that were really tough, and put them all in your heart map. Is everybody ready to get started?
Today, we are going to be reading the poem The Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. This first appeared in Alice in Wonderland, and it's very strange. It's got that weird sort of style. If you take a look at our objective for today, the goal is to use context clues to try to figure out words that don't make sense. Lewis Carroll uses a lot of nonsense words in this poem, very similar to Dr. Seuss, and you are going to try to figure out what he is saying. First, I'm going to need a brave soul to read our first stanza for us.
'Twas brilliant in the soapy tubs, did grind giggle in the wave. Old Mimsy were the burrow groves, and Mommy rasts outgrave.
Awesome, thank you for reading that. So as you guys can see, there are a lot of strange nonsense words in this poem. Luckily, we can take what we know about context clues and about parts of speech to try to figure out what our author means for each one of those unique words. Today, for our activity, we're going to break out into different groups, and each group will be assigned one of the stanzas from our poem. You and your teammates will look at each of those nonsense words and try to piece together what it might mean. While you're in your breakout groups, keep in mind that I'll be able to pop into each session to answer any questions that you have and help you along the way. At the end of class, we'll come back together to figure out what our whole interpretation might be, and then finally, we'll go over the homework for tonight.
Really great work today, guys. It was wonderful to be able to see you all and to learn with you all today. Just a quick reminder that your homework is going to be to watch the section 1.5 video and to take the Schoology assessment afterwards. I'm also going to be holding a study session at 1:30 p.m. for any student that wants a little extra help going into your upcoming quiz. And then just a final reminder that I'm available every day during office hours at the end of the day for any questions you guys have on your homework or anything about the lesson for today. It was great to see you all, and I can't wait to see you guys soon. Bye.
Thanks for coming to class today. The changes that have been made and what we have learned as teachers is going to allow us to provide remote instruction second to none. We're prepared with engaging activities, interactive lessons, and collaborative opportunities for our students. We teachers at Fairview School District are taking every step to make sure that our remote learning is successful and strong for all students. We're ready.
At FES, even in remote learning, we're still going to see your smiling faces every day. We'll have ELA and math lessons live throughout the week. We have a lot of new exciting tools to help meet our youngest K-2 learners at their level and assign lessons based on individual strengths and needs. And we won't forget the fun. We are committed to keeping our students engaged every day because we know the importance of feeling connected to your teachers and your fellow students.
Even though this year is going to look vastly different from previous years, we still have your students' best interests in mind. Each day, I will be interacting with students to instruct, assess, and check in with them. At Fairview, we care about developing the whole student. So in addition to using Schoology, we will also be doing video conferencing and using various apps to make sure that each student is on track, engaged, safe, and enjoying school again. This fall, the emphasis is on the students. They will be interacting with us and their peers daily, just like they would be in school.
As you can see, we are fully committed to building a robust online platform. While we know that face-to-face instruction is by far the most effective way to learn, we are committed to keeping students and staff safe during these uncertain times. We are eager to get all of our students back into the classrooms, but until we can do so safely, our teachers and support staff are going to provide the highest quality online remote learning platform. So that doesn't get into the weeds, but I think it gives parents a little bit of a perspective, right, of what to expect, what it's going to look like. Thanks to the Zona kids for starring in that video. That could be Carlina's big break. All right, right there. Any questions on that? We did roll it out to Schoology. We'll get that out on social media. I think it gives a nice 7.5 minute glimpse of what's to come.
So we're assuming teachers are here. If we end up in a phase where they can't be in the building, we confirm they all have adequate internet to continue this instruction.
Yep. Yeah, it would be very similar to last year where they would, we had one teacher who needed the hotspot last year and we provided that. So, yep, they're all going to come into their classroom. We have had questions, lots of questions from staff if they could work from home. Right now, our answer to that has been once a year. And we think that's really important. We think that we can control the climate, right, the environment. We have support. We have a really powerful wireless system here. So, and Brian can crank that up at any time he needs to as far as bandwidth. So, yeah, we're going to have people come here. We do have, I will tell you, we will have some people who won't be able to work due to childcare issues and maybe some health related issues. So we're working through those right now. We've identified who those people are, and we're trying to work with them to find some childcare for their children. But we could have as many as 5 or 6 teachers take advantage of the FFCRA, which is available to them. And again, we shared that with them. We had Attorney Wassell's office, the Knox firm, give us a comprehensive list of all the leaves available, and we shared that with our faculty and staff for just for full transparency and knowledge of what's out there. So we will have some people who likely won't be able to come back because of that. We have more people who can work in the remote phase though than in hybrid. Hybrid was going to cause more problems for some people because of where their children could be enrolled in the Fairview. But we're working through that. We know who those folks are, and we're identifying subs and trying our best. The sub pool is going to be very limited. It's going to be a problem for everyone. Most of us use the same provider, Kelly Services, and Mill Creek left Kelly Services and went to a different company, but the rest of us use Kelly Services, and we're all after the same people. So you may see us coming back in the near future for an increase in the sub rate. We raised it last year by a couple dollars. I think we're 86 now at 86 a day. Seems a little low right now considering what we're asking subs to do.
We haven't talked much about the tech kids. What's the busing plan for the tech kids? I know there was a survey out to them, but are we gonna be bringing kids here and then send them to tech? Or are they just gonna be directly bused?
They have the option of being picked up at their residence and transported to ECTS.
Directly there.
Yep.
So they'll be having this-
Yeah. They can pick them up right at their bus stop.
So it'll be smaller buses and groups of kids or full bus and schools that can go kind of thing? What's, I mean, I know we're going across
Maximum of
the town.
24.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
A maximum of 24 students on the bus. So there might be, we might have to take 2 in the afternoon to get more students.
They're accommodating the number of runs based on how many students they can fit on the buses, though, which is like Luke said, that's 24.
And there are some students that have declined, that they're either transporting themselves or they're getting a ride with another student. So.
Okay. That's where we are in the reentry plan. Keep the questions coming. We're trying our best to answer them. And if you've heard from someone that their questions have not been answered, maybe ask them to resubmit it, because we've been working hard to get back to everyone. Now, some of them are sort of form responses because we get the same question so often, just a little copy paste and personalize it to some extent, but we are getting back to everyone we can. Yep.
Just a couple of quick questions, just more for our knowledge, because some of the questions I am getting from parents are, like, we don't know on the active board, I don't know exactly what the workable spaces are if we are in a hybrid. So is there a list that you guys could share with us about what rooms you're planning on using in each building, just that when people ask us that, we have an idea?
Absolutely. By the way, it's like, what's the breakdown? Eight in this building. This building has more.
Yeah, this building
has the most large enough spaces to accommodate. The elementary has the fewest, and then the high school. So I think it's like 8, 4, and 7 or something like that. Fewer than that, but that's the breakdown. But we can provide you this space.
And then I'm sure, as everyone else heard, the mental health of the students is major concern, even more so than I think than the education piece for a lot of our parents. So, and I know that we've talked about mental health checks in the curriculum, and that we can just talk for 1 more minute just to give some of our parents a little bit more peace of mind that there is going to be checks, there's going to be people reaching out to them, those types of things. So I really think that's what they're concerned with.
Yeah, I think that the teachers are really good at picking up on those types of things, and Pam could probably give some insight on that as a teacher. Teachers are pretty astute, and they know when that's happening. Our kids, we've really emphasized in the last couple of years, if you see something, say something. You heard us say that a lot. We have, on that safe to say something, it's an app, right? It's on all the iPads. Most of the reports that come through are from a student on behalf of another student. Almost, right, Matt and Luke and Steve, most of them aren't the student himself or herself. It's a bystander who recognizes someone's getting picked on the bus, or they're being excluded from lunch, or they're being bullied. So we hope that will continue. I won't suggest that every kid's going to get mental health checks on a daily basis, but of course the ones that we know about, if there's an issue, yeah, we're going to do our best to do that. Our guidance counselors will be busy doing that. They're going to have all day to work on those sorts of things. They're not going to, obviously, they won't be having their lunch bunches and their small groups and their support groups that they would typically do. So they'll have an opportunity to do that. Anything to add?
I mean, I think what I'm going to say is going to be similar to what other buildings would say as well. But one of the areas that we did have some success in, it was one of the better aspects of what we did in the spring was our student assistance program. Our SAP team met frequently, much more frequently than they would have if we were just in school. And that kind of multi-layered approach, given the people that are on that team, really helped us identify the kids with the most need. So we're going to kind of re-implement that schedule to start the year as well. In addition to the individual teacher checks And kind of building specific too, our counselors have the ability early in the year, they'll meet with the upperclassmen individually. So there are actual individual class meetings with students in which they do have that one-to-one connection to kind of follow through anything that might have fallen through the day-to-day class. Teachers watch and or the staff team watch as well.
And just to add one more thing about our staff services, that's something that we've always had in place. But a challenge that we run into that is we hold those meetings during the day, and teachers aren't always available to be a part of those meetings. And teachers are our front line, they're seeing the students, they're interacting with the students most. In this remote scenario, we can have those meetings during those morning times or in the afternoon, so teachers can be available. They can be present, they can be there to recommend to us, the guidance staff and the Bethesda staff, of those students that need the special attention, so we can give them the services that they need.
Laura, it's a legitimate question and concern. I won't try to underestimate that. When kids are in school, our teachers are able to see visible signs, but more than that, it's typically not, and Ben can tell you, Billy can tell you, it's typically not in the elementary school visible sign. It's typically a kiddo telling you. It's typically a teacher telling you something that leads you to believe that something's not right. Okay. I mean, Steve can tell you firsthand. He may have saved a young lady's life a couple years ago in a situation because she reached out with a problem and he took action. So, not having that daily face-to-face, that is a concern. That is a disadvantage, certainly remote, and we're worried about that. See something, say something. We'll keep reminding our students of that. We have that app in place. What's nice about that app is that when a student reports something, it doesn't come directly to us. It goes to a call center first with trained counselors to ask students prompting type questions, and then they drill down as specific as they can get, and then they push it to us for us to contact the student. So a kid might say, Joey's being picked on the bus. Who's picking on him? What's he saying? Is he okay? Are you worried about him? And then we get that string of conversation so that we can talk to the child.
We've also looked at some screeners as well. So we are getting Mr. Lewis and Kovac now just acclimated, but I know we're looking at some mental health screeners that we can get out. We just need to see which ones we can do the best way virtually.
In addition, we do have on our website, under each school, where parents can, there's staff information, teachers can make referrals, fill out the information.
You may not know, but the counselors start ahead of the rest of our teaching staff, and so we do have a little bit of time with them where we can even fine tune further, particularly the two new ones that Julie mentioned. We'll have a chance to get them up to speed with the kids and start to formulate some plans, including introducing them to the kids. Although last week I already had a student reach out and say, "Can I talk to the new counselor? I think my parents are getting divorced," and she was ready to talk to somebody she didn't know. So we do have a little lead time with that. Actually, it's going to come in tomorrow, so we're going to start working.
We actually have another layer of all of that, and that is through our refocus room staff. Mrs. Enterline at the high school, she might have a larger caseload than any of our guidance counselors, really. Students who are just really comfortable with her, and they've opened up to her over the years. Mrs. Enterline actually has students that she still talks to who graduated several years ago, actually. But still, that's their safety net. And the middle school being a newer program, it's starting to develop, and folks down here are getting those caseloads as well. But Kim Enterline, she's helped a lot of kids over the years, and she'll continue to. So again, any questions, forward them our way. We'd be happy to answer them for you, and or for anyone else who needs them. I'm going to let George talk a little bit here for these next two items. We have two resolutions on the agenda tonight for. Did we skip that? Oh, yeah. Before we get to those two resolutions, we have an agenda item tonight for the Park and Rec contribution. This is based on Ed's recommendation. Last meeting yet, or the one before? July 13th. Yeah, the July meeting. And that is on this evening for your consideration. Ed did.
Make sure you've got the current motion up. Should be for 9,000. You have an older version up and right there, but we make sure it's 9,000.
And do you feel they have a solid plan of going forward? And
Yeah, David, I think they do. I was kind of back and forth with Brandon today. They've restructured the office. They laid off Lisa. You might remember from the July 13 meeting. They brought an APAC in, but at a reduced salary and schedule. So they're addressing expenses. And he said they're going to review their expenses every 2 weeks and just make sure that their results are lining up with their budget, kind of what they expected to see going forward. So they're going to watch it. I guess, time will tell if it's a good plan, but I've asked the financials monthly. I don't have July's yet at this point, but I should by the 24th. I'll bring those back and update you guys.
so they have a plan in place if we go back to a countywide red status and there's no activities or
They have the
whatever
ability
color you want to call
yeah.
it, everything is shut down.
They cut their expenses to a minimum.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where the concern is. We're throwing money away,
Yeah.
not so much in the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now items 4 and 5 are for George. The board resolution on the 180 days. And what happened? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, what happened to those rooms?
So
we go 3,000 to 9,000 on it?
9,000 is the recommendation.
9,000. Should be in the motion.
18 was the original
Half
request.
of their
Half of their original request. George, 189, 990?
Yeah, this is kind of a belt and suspenders motion. You've already approved a health and safety plan that was requested by Department of Education and the Governor's Office. But somebody realized that the school code actually provides for temporary emergency services, and that comply with the school code, we needed to have resolutions adopted that allow for the development and implementation of the program that you've already adopted and approved. This will also allow, I know we're in the remote learning phase right now, but as we transition back to hybrid yellow or traditional modified, and if we see spikes, if we see a second wave, we may have to act nimbly to transition between different learning models. So this authorizes the superintendent to develop and implement those programs. They have to conform with Chapter 4 regulations, and these emergency waivers can, by Section 5.1 of the school code, last for as long as 4 years. We're kind of hoping that doesn't happen. But because the legislature has continued, has told us that they want us to continue to abide by the 180 days, $900, 990 hours of instruction at elementary and secondary level. That's not being waived for the 2021 school year. It's recommended that all school districts adopt this or a similar resolution moving forward. So that's item number 4. Any questions? Item number 5 is just because you didn't have enough on your plate. Back in May, the United States Department of Education decided to implement new Title IX regulations. They did a substantial overhaul of the regulations, and they carved out sexual harassment. Of course, Title IX is the may not discriminate program of education on the basis of sex. So they carved out sexual harassment. They defined that as being part of sexual discrimination. Then they made very specific requirements with regard to the investigation. The compliance officer cannot be the investigator. There have to be certain very specific field processes in place. All staff that are involved in the implementation of those regulations have to be trained. And of course, those regulations go into effect on Friday. Of course, we found out that they published those regulations when we were in closed mode. So, you know, that was one of those things. Gee, when we get back to working in a semi-regular environment, we'll address those policies. And then instead we started implementing reopening plans. So we never got around to amending our Title IX policies. So, and like I mentioned, they do require rather substantial revisions. So what I did is prepare this resolution, and this is, again, circulating all over the Commonwealth, because everybody said, oh my, we forgot. You know? So there's about, of the 500 school districts, it gets about 470 of them are passing a resolution of this type. And it's basically, while we get around to amending our regulations, or our policies, we intend to abide by the new regulations that go into effect on August 14th. And the superintendent shall have the authority to take all necessary actions to implement these new regulations. I'm working on the drafts. That will include revisions to policies 1 and 3 and 4. And they're going to be so substantial that when I get them to you, I'm probably just going to write them as a new policy rather than showing the red line version, because you won't be able to read what the old stuff said. But I should have those ready for you in September, but in the meantime, I'm going to have this resolution passed with all effective date.
I can assure you, we are trained. We've gone through the process. Justin is our Title IX officer in the district. We have other folks who serve as investigators, not Justin. So we've gone through the appropriate training. It's just a matter of getting our policies in line.
And I would tell you in the meantime that while this was all going on, and because of the pandemic, the National School Boards Association wrote a letter to the U.S. Department of Education saying, hey, if you really think this is a good time to do this, maybe delay the implementation of those regulations, to which the Department of Education never responded. The Attorney General in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, and at least 17 other Attorney Generals in the United States have sued the department about the implementation of these regulations. They actually take the position that this is a step backwards in protecting victims of sexual harassment. But that litigation is going nowhere fast, so in the meantime, the regulations are going to be implemented, so we need to have policy. Okay. Mr. Barnes?
So, Treasury report for July, I want to show you just very quickly information on transportation. So, Dave, I think you asked this question in the last meeting about transportation and the cost of our contract, going forward through 2021. So, during our note phase, we're trying to define or determine exactly how many buses and drivers we're going to need. So we know for sure Erie County Tech School. Looking at the non-public transportation, there was an opinion that came out from one of the state attorneys that, or one of the law firms in the state that indicated that non-public transportation isn't needed if you're in a remote phase in your home district. George is taking a look at that. He's not prepared yet to give us an opinion about that. So we're looking at non-pub. I mean, we may need to provide it or may not need to. We're still looking at that. So the tech school extracurricular activities, we haven't really defined yet. That's going to not happen. So at this point, as long as we know sports as we go for the fall, we'll be bringing kids back to the district. We're taking them to sites where competition takes place. So that'll be a need as well. So we haven't really defined the number of buses yet. Those buses and drivers we don't need. We can negotiate with the contractor and come up with a lower rate per day per bus. Right now we have a full rate of $250, $260. They said the rate would be about half for a situation where the drivers are needed. So they have they have fixed costs they have to cover for the school bus and expenses in the office, that kind of stuff. So to cover their fixed expenses, we about half the rate for those drivers would be needed. I'll bring you more information on this. We develop the number of drivers we need and what the cost is going to be going forward. So
assuming we're having extracurricular activities, we're going to provide the busing from home here, and are we going to provide the busing back home?
So the request was to get them to school and back home.
Okay. So something they need time before.
Or remote days, yes. Or get them to a site where there's competition.
Okay, so the competition, and then back to school and then back home.
Right now, we've never been in a situation where we've had to take kids home after competition. We've never done that before, but that might be a situation here where we have to start doing that. We haven't really talked about that yet. We're defining the need, but that might be a need.
And then the other question about the tech school, I know that you mentioned there, you're looking at routes now, but if you're putting 24 kids on a bus, logistically, how long is it going to take to get around the township and get to the tech school? Are we kind of mapping out that time to make sure that
they
are the bus for an hour?
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, that's transportation. As we get more information or better information, we'll bring that back to you and keep it updated as we go here. So the treasury report for July, this is the first month. So looking at July 2020, there's not too much you can read from 1 month. We do know that the revenues began to increase pretty fast because of real estate tax collections. It was probably as good as it's been in past years for this July. So I don't see a major impact yet from COVID and the shutdown. So at this point, that still seems like it's pretty strong. Even EIT, if you look at the collections, this July versus last July was pretty strong. Up in the top right-hand corner there. Cash and investments were up 1.08 million. That's primarily due to the real estate tax collections. And then you can see the state revenue comparison there. And then there's an update to Norwood balances. So down below here, you can see through June 30, 2020, 138,403 deficit. And we had a 1 month funding holiday, so we didn't fund about 190,000 for 1 month. We typically would put into the fund. So we actually ran a little bit of a surplus if we had funded all 12 months for last year. And then you can see the inception date surplus of $1,803,000. So that's the general fund. Just a quick update on Norbit. So I did update this graph for the last month of the year for the June results. You can see the June revenues versus claims. Claims in orange, and our months in balance about 9 to 9.5 or so. So we have a healthy balance right now. We've got the plan to use 1 month funding holiday for the 2021 school year. EIT, there's really nothing yet to show you. Once we get the August, September collections, we'll start to show you what that looks like. The next couple of funds here, or no, these are the investments. So July investments, you can see in total, 17,935,000 for all funds. For the general fund, 7,729,000. So for the most part, our funds are at First National Bank. You can see in the general fund, we have a combination of money market and a CD, which is fixed. I think until December sometime at 3 million. That 1.9% won't be achievable. Once that matures, we're seeing rates well under 0.5% right now for CDs. So I think longer term, we're going to see low rates in the market, but for the next few years anyway. So that's general fund. Cap projects, our money split between First National Bank and Erie Bank. We've got the portfolio CDs, Erie Bank, you can see the range there. Those go out in time, so we were pouring some decent interest through at least part of 23-24 on those CDs. The rest of it at First National Bank, and then just return of the benefit account. You see that total there in the food service. So overall, we're up primarily because of general fund and real estate collections. The next couple of funds here, cap projects, balance of $9,368,000. You can see my note down below here. We still need to do the transfer from general fund from the 18-19 fund balance. So once we transfer that $1,359,000, then it'll take our balance up to $10,728,000. That would be the end of July balance, $9,360,000 less that transfer. And in the district term of benefit account balance, $719,993. Cafeteria fund, really pretty light on activities. Just the July lunches and breakfasts that we served were picked up at the middle school here. So that's the end of the summer serving. We're getting reloaded. We're giving the staff a break. We're getting things prepared for the new school year. So in the remote phase, we'll still be having lunches being picked up at the schools. We're trying to figure out exactly how we're going to do that. So we're working through the logistics at this point. The waivers came through for 2021. So you may recall that during the summer we had waivers that allowed us to not only have families pick up at the school, but we could serve multiple meals on a given day. So I think in July we were serving on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for a good part of the month. And these waivers allow us to continue to have parents pick up meals at the school and to serve at different times. So as an example, we could have families pick up meals in the evening for the next day or for the next 2 days. So we're kind of working through those plans, getting ready for September 1st. The one waiver that didn't come through is the ability for all kids to pick up lunches at no cost. So those kids who pay for lunch will have to pay for lunch in 2021. That was not the case during the shutdown beginning March 15th.
What about the 0 to 5-year-old waiver?
That is not in place either. So these are just kids that attend our school.
We were able to feed any child ages 1 to 18 Fairview. That's not a part of it.
They would just be our kids.
Just school age kids.
Yeah. So those waivers will be in place for the 2021 school year. And then, let's see, just student activity accounts, the high school balance, 43,000, the middle school, 2,000. Student membership, of course, there's nothing to report there. The kindergarten enrollment number is 128 as of today. So it's getting up close to where it was last year. Last year was like 135, so we're creeping up towards that number. And I think that's it for July.
We have one capital projects purchase tonight. We discussed this at our last meeting. We discussed some various teachers' desks and tables, mainly for the new teachers in the elementary school. Our Herb Jones contract, this isn't on for your consideration tonight, but it will be for our next meeting. This is our yearbook contract. This is a little late because we were exploring some other vendors for yearbook, but we decided to renew with Herb Jones. You've heard me say this before, we only do 1-year contracts with these folks, even though they would like us to do multi-year contracts. We learned from that mistake in the past. So we do a 1-year contract. They don't like that, but it's in our best interest. And that's a self-funded. The students pay for that with the purchase of the yearbooks, and we sell ads to help to offset the cost. Student and teacher handbooks. This was to be a discussion on the education committee tonight. But rather than breaking the committee, we just decided to do it here. And there's a topic on this particular agenda that I think is of interest to the entire group and worth a group discussion as well. So we will tackle that. Typically, when we do handbook discussions in committee, we just talk about the changes to those handbooks because they were already board approved the previous year. So you want to start with elementary on that, or you can pull those up? Someone pull those up.
Are you guys want to just plan just or you want me to?
Doesn't matter. You want to go where you're there?
What am I looking at?
Elementary handbook.
This is Fairview Elementary School, Perry. So.
Yeah, I hit it. It's supposed to be loading right now. So.
Ben, do you want to talk about the changes?
Well, there really are no changes. We focused most of our changes on the addendum. Are we going to go over that tonight, or?
Yeah, if you don't have anything on here, we can show the addendum.
Yeah, we were basically, and I don't want to speak for all three principals, other than there was some language we just cleaned up to make it sound smoother, but everything is staying the same in all practicality. Just we decided not to touch some of the areas that once all this goes away, we'll just go back to the old system. So I don't have that. Do you have that? Or I have it somewhere.
It's loading.
So are we gonna be putting the class schedules and stuff in the handbook as far as the?
Not in the handbook necessarily, David. We'll publish them on the, we'll have them on the website and we'll have them on the dashboard for the building.
You may want to make a note then at least to say during, restricted phase, check here for the updated schedule. Anything that's a difference in the handbook, because if you're reading through it, we all were supposed to sign off that we read it.
Yeah.
Now it's one's conflicting the other, you won't be sure
Yeah.
what's.
And I'm looking at the addendum and it looks like we missed that.
You missed.
I don't see schedules on this addendum.
We try to make this specific to, I mean, just from the elementary school, the schedule is going out in a different document. I mean, we can combine all that together, but we don't.
Well, it's not in your handbook anyway.
That is not the actual schedule, other than the start time of school and end time of school. We don't have the special schedule in the.
That's what I'm saying, the start and end time, we have to put the information.
Yeah. We'll go through and kind of balance it out for that, but and any of the principals feel free to jump in on any of these, but we really, with COVID, we are trying to do away with kind of the enforced attendance where we, at the elementary school, kids work to achieve perfect attendance. So we're talking about getting away with the perfect attendance award and to have our attendance policy based on their attendance to class and submitting work. So if we do go back to school, we're not enforcing, and we want kids to stay home if they're sick and not feel pressure to come to school. The masks, we were talking about, that's a new addition to the dress code, and we would enforce it through dress code policy. Both at the middle school and high school, they'll be carrying their book bags as opposed to going into locker bays. That will limit the crowding. Bus passes we used to, especially at the elementary school, allow bus passes. So if Johnny wanted to go play with Betty, she could just come down to the office and get a bus pass with. If we were to go to yellow or green or I'm sorry, using the wrong lingo, but if they were to go to the modified traditional, we can't allow that because we have to know how many kids are getting on each bus. And so we are not going to allow the bus passes, and also with the exception of IEP meetings and 504s and GIPs, we are not going to be allowing visitors within the school.
What about bus passes for like high school kids, say late, right?
Well, there's a problem with that because if we are only allowed to have 24 kids on a bus and then a kid shows up unannounced on the bus, obviously we're going to work our, tail off to get him where he needs to be, but we just may not have a seat.
So impossible to
Yeah.
get a seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, to eliminate the birthday treats at the elementary, which will, reduce spread. Anyway, principal.
Steve, was there anything specific from the middle school that Ben missed?
No, we made no changes, just the addendum that Ben reviewed right there. All around.
So I understand the desire to not use lockers, but is there any concern about them now carrying backpacks around?
Of course. Yeah, it's a safety concern.
It's a huge safety concern.
It's a huge safety concern. We're going to encourage kids. We don't think they're going to need to. We're going to allow them to if necessary, but they don't have 5 or 6 textbooks anymore. They're typically just carrying an iPad and maybe one textbook. So we're just not going to have those spaces, those locker bays open. We're going to zip out the lockers so they're not going to have access to them. So we're going to have to give them some way to get the materials.
When I discussed that with Officer Raz, we were kind of weighing, as you noted, kind of the safety double-edged sword of carrying the book bags, and you kind of expressed it as, although both are worrisome, the more imminent threat would be the idea of close contact and what could happen if something was contracted, versus the likelihood of something, a very violent happening. So it was, I don't want to say it was a tough call. We talked it through though, and he supported this move too.
Talking having kids maybe 10 to 12 inches apart, not longer than.
Sure.
One of the major changes at the high school that Dr. Lane is proposing is some dress code things.
I thought we were going to talk about bus pass.
Oh, you don't know about and this is a hot topic. It's something that Mr. Vitale and I have talked about, Attorney Joseph and I have talked about a lot over the years. We'll let Matt introduce this and let you guys know where he's thinking.
So we do have some other handbook language regarding dance forms and stuff like that, but as Dr. Kincaid noted, we do have a section of the dress code that we were looking to amend. We, on page 35, if you reference that, you don't need to reference now, I'll talk you through the stuff you need to know. We did add language prohibiting the wearing of hats, bandanas, Confederate flags, and Nazi swastikas in short. In other words, we have a section that notes clothing, drawing, tattoos, and accessories that display or promote negative messages are not permitted. This is currently in the handbook now. These could include drug, gang, weapon, alcohol, tobacco-related information, obscenities, put down stereotypes, sexual innuendo, offensive words, and then what's been added here is threatening graphics, such as the Confederate flag, the Confederate battle flag, and/or the Nazi swastika. I know there's 3 listed there, but it's really 2 images that we're talking about. So why those 2 images in particular? Those 2 images in particular for us are worrisome for a couple of reasons. They specifically represent and have been adopted by white supremacists and white nationalists to portray their message of white supremacy. They've also been referenced in specific acts of violence just within the past 2 to 3 years even. And they themselves have in many ways been adopted as threats themselves by the message that they convey and what they've been adopted to mean. that's troublesome for us in a couple of ways. It undermines several things specifically that we're trying to do within the building. And, specifically in our district vision, we have language, we have a phrase specifically that talks about embracing diversity. And these are symbols that work in direct opposition to that goal of embracing diversity, especially for our non-white students, whether it be Black students, Asian students, Latinx students. These are specifically the groups that these symbols have targeted with their messages and their threatening natures. It also undermines, and these things are all related, these aren't exactly separate things, but inherent to that threat is just the notion of what we've been doing for student safety throughout the years. Our students from those groups that I just mentioned and others don't feel safe when they see these images in the building. And because of that, there have been other organizations and groups that feel the same way we do, recognize these symbols and their ability to undermine the shared vision of the building, the district as a whole, and they banned these images as well, be it the Marine Corps, NASCAR, or, I think by the week this summer, you can Google and read about all of the schools, the high schools across the country that have added this language to their handbook prohibiting these images within the building. In particular, at Fairview High School, in the past 14 to 16 months, we've had instances of swastikas etched throughout the building in a variety of places, in classrooms, in our bathrooms, and on furniture in our classrooms as well. These are situations that I've been able, and Mr. Bell and I have been able to deal with, internally. We have talked to students, we have talked to their families. We've never actually been able to catch anybody that has done it, but we have talked to students and families, and the concerns that they express to us kind of echo what you would think they would echo. They don't feel safe in the building. They don't feel welcome in the building. And it creates an unwelcoming climate of inclusivity and an attempt to try to do all the things that we do, not just for the students' learning, but for the students' social emotional well-being as well. Now, those are things we've dealt with ourselves. Those are things we've been able to do and address on our own. But we also, in some ways, this isn't something for which we want to be reactive. We're not reactive in much of anything we do when it comes to student safety. And I don't think this should be one of those things either. We kind of want to be proactive and get out in front of that. I'll list a couple of reasons why I think that, reasons why we can and need to do this. There's just a couple of legal things. I mean, Attorney Joseph is here. Attorney Natalie is the president of the school board. We have them here. You don't need to think, well, but Matt said this is a good idea. So we should listen to what he says regarding this topic. Instead, what I'm saying is there are reasons why we can do this. And there's reason to be cautious. There's reasons to understand the potential obstacles. There are reasons to possibly consider case law that suggests otherwise, but there is case law that suggests that we can as well. So for all of us, for all the building administrators and principals, we know that, the legal guidance for free speech comes from the Tinker Supreme Court case that gives students the right to free speech within a public school building. Following, many decisions following that case have provided even more guidance on what free speech means, because it's not unlimited free speech. For example, we have a dress code. So why can we have a dress code? We can have a dress code because it's not unlimited free speech. We can limit speech that infringes on rights, that prevents lewd, vulgar, or obscene speech that undermines a basic educational mission. So, that was the original case that talked about student free speech, but then there have been others that follow. Just last month, you probably saw in the news a circuit court case regarding a high school student free speech case. It was a girl who had made a comment on social media in an off-campus setting in the evening regarding her school. The school disciplined her, and the courts ruled on behalf of the student. But that was in particular a reference to off-campus speech. What we're talking about here in particular deals with our in-the-building dress code. There's also been Fourth and Fifth Circuit Court cases that speak specifically to the Confederate flag itself. And both of those rejected the student's First Amendment right to wear a Confederate flag. And did note that school officials are not required to wait until disorder or invasion occurs, but need only the existence of facts which might reasonably lead school officials to forecast a substantial disruption. We have incidents of this at Fairview High School. We have incidents of this that jeopardize the safe learning environment for our students, which is why we felt, and I felt it was prudent to add this language to our dress code policy this year, because it was a gap. In our conversation with students, it's one of the the things that's difficult to explain. When a student asks, why can you tell a student that they can't wear a shirt that says Budweiser, but they're allowed to wear a Confederate flag in the building, given what that symbol means to me and what others have proven that symbol means through their actions. Right, so we thought this was a gap that needed to be filled in our dress code policy.
Yeah, this one's a close one, because what Matt's talking about is speech that by virtue of its nature is unprotected from the First Amendment. And when we talk about that, we generally talk about what we call hate speech. And he's quite right. I mean, if you look at the history of the Confederate flag, it is a symbol, and when I say Confederate flag, I mean the battle emblem, because we can't get mixed up with those metaphors. But it is a symbol of, and has been adopted as a symbol of white supremacy. It was adopted by the Dixiecrats in the 1940s in support of segregation. There's a long history. I mean, the battle emblem was taken into battle against the United States during the Civil War. And we also know that the Confederacy itself was the cornerstone, I guess, and the Vice President of the Confederacy gave a cornerstone speech in Savannah, Georgia, where he actually indicated the cornerstone of the Confederacy rested upon the great truth that the Negro was not equal to the white man. That slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural, normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. So, and it's pretty strong evidence to suggest that the Confederate battle emblem is a symbol of segregation, white supremacy, and hate. With that said, I think you have to review it in the context of the First Amendment rights of the students, which is not coextensive with the rights of adults in other settings. We do have certain restrictions that we can impose upon the rights of students to speak, and the seminal case is Tinker, which was pure speech in the sense that there was no speech involved at all. Tinker involved students wearing black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. And the upshot of the case is that the school district could not impose restrictions on speech unless they could show that there was a substantial or material disruption in the educational or learning environment or they could reasonably forecast that the disruption would occur. And that's kind of a line of cases that follow the thinker. There's some other cases that deal with restrictions on student speech. One of those is the Fraser case, which is the lewd, vulgar, and profane speech. That was the student that was giving a nominating speech for a student class officer and made some really wild statements that he was disciplined for, and the court upheld that on the basis that we as school districts can regulate speech that is lewd, vulgar, or profane. Query whether the analysis of the Confederate battle flag is done under pure speech, under Tinker, or under the lewd, vulgar, and profane speech of Fraser. Matt mentioned some law that we can regulate students from wearing T-shirts that advocate or advertise beer or cigarettes or illegal drugs, marijuana leaves, things of that nature. That's a separate case, the Morse case. That was the Bomb Gets for Jesus case, where the students went and watched the parade and they held out a banner when the Pope went by. So we can regulate those types of speech. And in the Third Circuit, which governs Pennsylvania, there's also a case out of the State College area school district that deals with speech in the context of discrimination and harassment policies. And in that case, the Third Circuit cautioned us that the free speech clause protects a wide variety of speech listeners may consider to be deeply offensive, including statements that impugn another's race or national origin or which denigrates religious beliefs. And that these types of regulations are subject to a strict scrutiny test. And that is quite correct, that test has come down to, at this point, a material disruption in the educational environment or a reasonable forecast. They don't have to show that an actual disruption has occurred in the past, but that we reasonably believe that a disruption would occur in the future. Most of the Confederate battle emblem flag cases that I have read, and I've read a lot of them in preparation for tonight, deal with school districts that have a history of racial tension, integration. They're mostly border state cases. South Carolina, Missouri, Tennessee, Ohio, kinds of cases where there's a history of integration and tensions associated with integration. And those kinds of cases, they uphold the ban. But where we're not able to show the existence of any disruption or a thought that there's going to be a disruption, it's more difficult to uphold. Matt has explained to you some instances in which there have been some Nazi swastikas or other hate symbols that have been caught by the administration before they've managed to cause a disruption. And that's all good, and that may reasonably allow us to forecast that there may be a problem in the future. And I guess the bottom line is ultimately, what are the odds that somebody challenges the dress code with this in it, and what are our chances of defending it? You may not have any substantial issue with the dress code. A lot of people have implemented these types of dress codes without incident. If somebody is disciplined because they did, and challenges that, I think the question is going to come down to whether or not we have that type of reasonable expectation that it would cause a problem, or that it has caused a problem. Eric and I actually talked today about the issue. We actually had one instance during Eric's tenure where a student was asked to remove the Confederate battle emblem from clothing when he appeared at a school function. And he did so without incident. So we don't really have any experience with anybody challenging it. I would be concerned about our ability to defend it. But I think I'd probably give you a fair review of both sides of the argument. I seriously question our ability to defend it in light of our history.
George, are you concerned with our ability to defend it in 2020, 2021, versus even 2017 or 2018? Don't you think today, even more than ever, it's universally recognized as a symbol of hate?
Well, yes, I absolutely agree with that. There was actually one of the cases that I read was a lawsuit that was filed by a black lawyer in Mississippi who sued the governor of Mississippi to remove the Confederate battle emblem from the Mississippi state flag. If you're familiar with the old flag, and they have changed it, by the way. But in 2016, the upper left quadrant of the Mississippi flag had the Confederate battle flag in it, where the U.S. flag would have the stars. And raised the issue of hate speech, of white supremacy, and those types of issues. Ultimately, the case was dismissed on technicality, but the legislature was prompted to actually call a constitutional convention and change the flag. So yeah, I think today versus perhaps 2010 or 2014, I think it's much more recognized as a symbol of pure hate, pure white supremacy. Yes.
So are you concerned with our ability to, so to speak, punish somebody for wearing it? Like, not that we can put it in there, or we can say, hey, can you take this off, and they go change their shirt. But if you deliver a consequence for it, but then how do you say that's a consequence for wearing the shirt versus insubordination, not following the directive?
The answer is, if somebody wears a sweatshirt with the Confederate battle emblem on it, teacher says that's a violation of the dress code, you're going to have to take the sweatshirt off. Student refuses to do that. Students disciplined for a dress code violation, challenges the dress code. I'm concerned of our ability to defend the dress code.
How is this different than, say, if we had, everybody has to wear a red polo shirt to school?
That is specifically authorized by the school code, that school districts can adopt school uniform policies.
I'm unsure of what difference it makes whether it's in the handbook or not.
For the purposes of disciplining a student for what they wear to school?
Yeah, you can discipline them anyway, can't you? Why does it have to be in the handbook?
Or, I don't know why, if it's not in the handbook, I'm not sure why you would discipline unless there was a disruption.
Well, I mean, you can't list every offensive item or
Content based.
right. I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's a slippery slope. You're going to end up listing all the things that are offensive in 2020, and then in 2025, there's going to be a new list.
Which is what Pam's saying. Isn't it easier just to have a non-content based regulation that says all clothing worn in school must be solid color, or a print absent of any text.
Well,
basically a completely content-free regulation. I agree with Matt and George's analysis is that's hate speech.
I do.
But, you know, a judge may not, a jury of 12 may not.
I just think,
Well, and
I think right now is the time to take that chance.
Yeah, I mentioned this state college area case only because it states very specifically in that case that you may not like this, the content of my speech. You may find it absolutely detestable. My speech may impugn somebody on the basis of race. That doesn't necessarily rise to the level of something that we can control.
and it would be impossible to list all the speech that would cause something like that.
That's what content-based, right? It's a prior restraint of speech, right? Saying that this, you cannot engage in this form of speech. You do not accept it, it's not acceptable, you this is it. Versus a non-content-based regulation such as you may wear solids, you may wear prints, you may wear plaids, you may not wear any verbiage to school, which is it's basically a blanket ban on expressive clothing. So perhaps with the absence of a logo or the Nike logo or the MK logo or something like that. So if it was completely content neutral regulation, I don't think it would be action for it. My concern about the handbook change is that it will invite a suit, and we do have to be prepared to defend it. And if we do lose, we're liable for damages and attorney's fees under the Civil Rights Act. So
what is that exactly?
Well, you could be anything. The child could be compensated for their denial of their free speech rights, and their lawyer from Philadelphia, who's charging $800 an hour, could be compensated from the district's coffers to pay for the attorney's fees that were expended in pursuing the Civil Rights Act.
And her private jet flights
Exactly.
to and from
So
Philly.
my feeling is if there's concern about content-based speech in the school, then a dress code that addresses content can be done in a different manner than a content-based regulation. The flag, this Nazi symbol, the middle finger,
There's a list goes on and on.
You can pick any number of offensive symbols. I'm not trying to equate them on the same plane.
No, not at
They're
all.
certainly different levels.
Well, they're different for the audience.
Right. So that's kind of where we're at is I've been an advocate of uniforms. I mentioned it in my first year on the board 10 years ago. Why don't we have uniforms? It would do away with all these issues of disparity. It would do away with it. And then I got tongue lashed for suggesting that in Fairview, we consider a dress code of khakis and red shirts and that kind of thing, because of the desire to express oneself through dress. But when you start talking about, especially among certain social economic strata, so when you start talking about content, so then you go from everything's permitted, but we're going to carve out these 1, 2, 3, 4 things and say you can't wear those. That's where the concern about about being a content-based regulation is going to invite a suit. It's going to invite the possibility of losing that suit and having to defend and pay to defend not only our own defense costs, but the prevailing winner's costs. So maybe the larger issue is a dress code, consideration. Is that you may wear anything you want so long as it's so long, covers your shoulders, and doesn't have any words on it. So if you say you can't wear words to school, you're not creating a content-based. You can't wear any flag. You can't wear any.
I find this absolutely, in a way, like appalling and absurd that we have to debate this at this point in time, because we look around this room, there's nobody in here that has any like, that we're not the ones who are affected by that.
But there will be one who
And-
will be.
No, but that's my point, is like, I find it hard for us to say that it's okay to leave it in there, or to not say that they can't wear it. If you look around this room, it's hard to justify that because we might be afraid of something, that it's okay for somebody else who is not represented here. And we have to think about the people who are not in this room too. And there are a lot of people who are going to be greatly offended and who have very strong feelings and who are going to feel under attack.
I'm in the room and I'm not affected by it, but I'm offended by it.
But you know what I mean? Like, there's people who feel very, very deeply about this, and we don't represent
But
them.
can't you reach the same result with a regulation that's not content-based?
That's, yeah, you can.
Without-
I'm not comfortable backing away because I'm afraid of a lawsuit.
No, well, no, so there's a difference between being
not fair.
afraid of a lawsuit, whereas George is being concerned for it being not able to defend the lawsuit.
Right.
And then being on the hook for the Philadelphia lawyers' fees to prosecute the lawsuit. Or, some ACLU, don't want to say ACLU, but some liberal-based, attorney outfit that went after this policy. So my feeling is, don't give them the opportunity, remove the content-based regulation, say, all of our children are not permitted. You're just not permitted to wear words to school.
It's not just words, it can be pictures.
Well,
It's
but
very
there's
subjective.
symbols, words.
But what offends you is very subjective. I mean, somebody might have a picture of a rapper on their shirt that, maybe you don't like the music they sing, or that they find that offensive, so therefore you find the picture of the rapper offensive. I mean, it just,
Again, which supports my contention that we should be studying a dress code.
Alan, don't you think though, we already have the ability to make a child remove an article of clothing that creates a disruption in the school? If it creates a disruption to the education, to the learning process, we can have that, no matter what it is, if it creates a disruption. Don't you think, so in other words, if a student would wear the Confederate battle flag to school, we could, without this language, we could have him remove it if it creates disturbance in the class. I think that the language in the handbook, more than anything, sends a message. And I think that's what Matt is getting at. It's hurtful to a lot of our kids, but it also sends a message that we're not going to tolerate it in our
I understand that, we shouldn't tolerate it. But I'm listening to our lawyers saying that we can't defend the policy if we amend it.
Well, what if do we have to place it in the handbook? Could it be somewhere else?
Well, it has to you're giving notice to the community that this isn't permitted.
Can I ask for clarification too, George? Are you suggesting that the policy is indefensible or it would be subjective?
I think it would be difficult to defend.
Difficult to defend, okay.
I support a policy change like this, but only if that it is accomplished without, in my opinion, which is content-based restriction. I don't understand why we can't accomplish the same thing through a different policy that's not content-based. In other words, you can't wear words, symbols, flags, any flag. You could be the most patriotic kid in the school, want to wear an American flag on your ball cap. That is a content neutral regulation, which can't be challenged. It's perhaps more reactionary, but at the same time, I think it's defensible because it's not based on, you can't say these things or you can't express yourself these ways. And if you do, you're gonna get sanctioned, and then you're gonna go home to mommy and daddy who's got the flag flying on their flagpole. We're gonna say, I'm gonna call the local chapter of whatever organization. Yeah,
I think that the only difference being in that, and I'm not saying that I think specifically what I'm saying is that not all content is evil. I think you're saying that too. I mean,
It's different.
There is, and
Middle
it's
finger
not just,
versus the Confederate flag.
are not the same thing, and it's not just a question of what's offensive to some people. Sure, a variety of things could be offensive to different people. These two specific images, I'm suggesting, are an active threat. The middle finger, or the Budweiser, or a bomb didn't, kill 22 people in El Paso or 9 people in Charlottesville based on this specific image. And the students that are on the receiving end of that aren't offended by it, they're threatened by it. And that's where I would say the continuum rose to the point where it was concerning to me and the kind of climate we had in the building and how our students did or did not feel safe.
Has it occurred? Is there?
I think that's the thing we don't know about.
Yeah.
I did share this.
More about that myself.
Yeah, I
Right.
did share the swastika stuff. The Confederate flag stuff, aside from the extracurricular event, we've been able to deal with similarly in the building through conversation with students.
Which is
And
a
it
good
would be
way.
the same thing in this situation is if a kid wears something inappropriate, we don't calm them down and give them detention.
No.
We say,
We
hey,
talk
like,
to
listen,
them.
yeah, we have a conversation with them.
Or her.
We ask some questions, we explain some stuff, we give them the opportunity, to make a decision they change their shirt, they change
That's
their
what
shirt.
education is.
Yeah, it's not like we just thump them immediately for every violation of that. All of those dress code violations include a conversation. In fact, I don't even know if we had any dress code discipline.
So why not just say any offensive or threatening symbols or picture graphics? I mean, why not just make it general so that you can deal with them individually that way? It's not content, which is that still considered content?
Yeah, that was one of the new words I added and then clarified with the such as. So I don't know if threatening would suffice.
Just use the word threatening or offensive and take the such as out. But if we open-ended, so you can address it on an individual basis, but I don't know. Drawing something on a table or a desk isn't wearing it.
I mean, I'm willing to support the change and take the risk, as Pam's talking about, but I think we might need to build a better record of the manner in which these images have already created.
And that's where I was just not comfortable. Like, we just have to subject more kids to it
Right.
to get to where we need to.
No,
Like,
I think the answer to that's no.
Right.
But I think what we need to do is have a file or some documentation that says, okay, I took the Nazi swastika, I scrubbed that off a desk, on May 7th, and I had the janitor remove it from the bathroom tile on, when and say these are happening in our building.
Sure.
This is not and we're removing them because we can make a reasonable forecast that this would disrupt the educational environment.
It already has.
It's not.
It already has. We had visits to the office by distraught minority students who have felt threatened on such and such a day. And
Incidents of bullying.
Any student, it doesn't.
well,
Yeah.
I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, and if we build that file, and you may have that.
Right.
Then that's things that I'm not currently privy to because you've dealt with them. And I might feel more comfortable about defending the policy at that point. And maybe New is right that we may be able to not single this out, but still make it.
Still get the point across.
Why can't we state an aspirational statement of aspirational policy that we find these images to be threatening, to be offensive, and for that reason.
Do we say which may include instead of such as?
No, and for that reason, and I'll say it again, it's been 10 years, but I'll say it again. And for that reason, we are instituting a dress code for that you may wear red, white, or black polos, sweaters, cardigans, khakis, black, tan, you know, and get to a dress code. And that.
Uniform code.
Call it, I guess they call it a dress code, but, the uniform is what, you know, the wore in parochial school.
That seems to be more extreme.
Yes, it is extreme.
To me, it seems it's just more extreme. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a T-shirt that has, you know, the Cancun on it, the place to be visited, or whatever. I mean, to say you can't have anything like that. I mean, it's the things that are offensive or threatening, which could be anything. It could be a
offensive to
sign
wear
of
a
the
Cancun
cross that
t-shirt.
somebody is offended by the
It
sign.
could be offensive to wear a Cancun t-shirt to someone who's never been on vacation. That offends me. You're displaying your white privilege.
But it's not threatening, though.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's offensive because you're showing your white privilege that you can go on vacation. I can't. So where do you draw the line with what's offensive and what certainly can define these two or three items as offensive and threatening, which is Matt's suggesting.
Offensive has been in the language. I added threatening.
Right. And you can define them as such as this, you can find them as examples, but you're saying in that very moment, you're saying you can't wear these things and you're making it completely content-based. As opposed to, we find that is disruptive to the school for students to wear disruptive, threatening, it breaches the peace, or whatever the words are that George uses, to wear clothing that displays imagery. And therefore, we're going to go to a code.
Should we postpone this case for another meeting? I don't know if the discussion's over.
Yeah, I agree, David. Is this
The
on
only
for tonight?
problem,
It's on
I
the
think, was
24th.
that Matt's gonna say, he's gotta get his.
Well,
Is it on?
parents are actually currently signing the handbook that has this language in it, but it has parenthetically noting pending board approval.
Pending board.
Pending
You can do
board
that.
approval, so.
And you can do that.
Doesn't say when we have to approve it.
How long can we keep it like that? I mean, we got things going on right now, right?
And we can talk about the dress code maybe at another time post-pandemic.
Well,
You know?
I
I think there's some
that
valid points
that
there.
conversation could get really
I think
long.
this is on
But I
the
think
24th, isn't it? On for the 24th?
It is. It's not a motion tonight.
It's not on tonight anyway, guys.
Oh, okay.
Pending board approval till.
Yeah.
How
I'd like to
long?
say
Till 2025.
I'd like to just bring this back on the 24th with some historical information from the office, from the building principals, could be other building principals as well, in terms of what the effect these displays have had on the peace and function and of the buildings, of the school setting, environment.
I would be interested in the students that may have come to you or the guidance counselor or somebody that felt intimidated.
And therefore, those can be included in the minutes of the meeting when we vote on handbook changes.
I can share that, we can share that with the group, we can share that with you, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you, we've had this discussion at the superintendent level in the county, and Mrs. Miller in Girard told the story that she had a young man who was driving around in his pickup truck with a Confederate flag in the back of the truck.
See it every day.
And pulling and parking in their parking lot at the school.
Yeah.
And some students complained to her about it. She called the young man in and told him that, explained to him why it was offensive. And his comment to her was, I wasn't trying to offend anybody. I just thought it was redneck. And that's what I think I'm redneck. I'm a country music redneck kind of a guy. He didn't mean that in a bad way or in a meaning way, but he didn't know that it was an offensive symbol. When she gave him some history on it, he actually apologized and removed it from his truck and said he would no longer carry it around.
I also think it's worth noting that we can document that stuff. There's also a lot of understanding as to why a minority student, I mean, I don't know that our threshold should be who has reported it and who hasn't, because there are a myriad of reasons why students don't report a concern about that thing in a school setting as well. So I just
You're
want
right.
I think that's important to note as well.
That's why this discussion, I mean, this is an important discussion for a variety of reasons.
I
but
know,
that's,
and I know the timing's not great. I mean, believe me, back in June, the timing wasn't great. I know that's challenging for us and for you now too. I just thought it was something important
I won't feel right unless I add my 2 cents. George, I don't keep notes, but we're very white, so it's not too difficult for me to tell you. I don't think an African-American student has gone through the middle school without some time or more than once during that 4 years reporting. There's no flags. This isn't part of my changes, but they've come to me and they've shared comments, statements, slurs that have been hurled their way without exception. Every one of them kind of says, "No, I know I have to put up with that." And I'm like, you don't, they think they have to put up with it. They only come when it gets so horrible that they have a hard time tolerating it. I think with that bit of information, when you say, the states in the South, maybe that's a little more of an issue. I contend if you're of a different race in Fairview, it's tougher to be here and not be white than it might be in the South where you have more peers that share your race. So I can't think of one student in my 15, this could be my 16th year here, that's gone through the middle school who hasn't at some point talked to me about their struggles with that. And that's not right. So it sits a chord with me for whatever reason, and I don't want to hear your points to it, but I just wanted to have my 2 cents.
That, those students that share that Steve's talking about, those students that share that, when in our conversation with students as well, we'll ask, well, who else saw this? Well, who else reported this? And they'll say, well, so-and-so and so-and-so, but they don't want to make a big deal about it. It's not worth it to them, or they don't feel comfortable reporting that, or they don't want to do that. And I really do feel strongly it's our job to be their voice in those situations. And it's our job not to wait for them to have to report it and advocate on their behalf for their safety and learning in those situations.
I'd like a report maybe on, if we could, George, on if there's Confederate flag cases, synopsis of Confederate flag swastika cases out there.
There's plenty of
Different jurisdictions. I mean, that would be a helpful thing for the board on the 24th. Okay. Let's move
Okay,
on.
I'll transition to the last item, which is personnel matters. We have one hire of a teacher on for your consideration this evening. It is a first grade teacher, Kylie Arthurs. Kylie has been teaching at Iroquois for the last 4 years. Prior to that, she had 4 years in other places throughout the state. She had a couple of different positions, but she's been in Iroquois for 4 years. I feel badly because this is about the 5th person that we've taken from Iroquois. But they applied and they just happen to be the best candidate. So I don't feel badly about hiring the best person or recommending the best person. So we're very excited about Kylie. She's a Fairview resident and recently married. That's why you see the in parentheses there for R. Is her married name as maybe a couple of weeks ago?
2 weeks,
Yeah. And yeah, oh, sorry, what? Did someone say that? Oh, yeah. The long-term sub is for a custodian. We would change the status with the custodian. We are assigning our mentors to our new teachers tonight and a couple of student teachers to be working with our staff this fall. We are limiting our student teachers this year so that we can keep those numbers down in the buildings, but we've already made some commitments to some of the universities. And that is it for personnel matters, Mr. Talley, and that wraps up committee.
Okay, thank you for a long night. We are not going to go into executive session again tonight. We do have personnel matters to attend to in executive session, but given the latest of the hour, we're not going to do that. We are really late on Dr. DK's evaluation.
That's okay.
So that's one thing, and then we have some other issues to discuss. So I thought of the idea, I'm going to float it, whether we could potentially have an executive session in advance of our next meeting at like say 5:30 to try to at least get into some of these personnel issues before the 6:30 meeting, but I'm not sure about everybody's work and home schedules, whether that might be any thoughts from our fellow board members?
I think an hour would be plenty of time.
An hour, 5:30.
It would be fine.
We do shoot for an executive session at 5:30. I guess it'd be on the 24th.
I'll remind you.
We'll remind us of that, so we're not staying late, too much later than we would otherwise.
You're bringing dinner, right?
I'll bring leftover cookies. Whatever's left over there, I'll be there for next time.
If any chance for salty meats, we'll bring a tray, don't worry.
Actually, we have in the past, I will take care of it. We have in the past done pizza party, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can
so.
we fix this projector, because depending who's presenting, the left side gets chopped off. I don't know if you can see over here,
But somehow the form factor on that projector got changed.
it depends who's presenting, because some.
I can adjust it. Okay, we're gonna adjourn the committee of the whole, call the public board meeting to order with the pledge of allegiance. Please stand. Come on. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for 1 moment of silence for our recent victims of COVID in our community, several senior citizens that I understand. Thank you. Recognition of visitors, our visitors on. Public comment on agenda items. Anyone want to make any further comment on our agenda items this evening? Hearing none. Business operations, consent agenda items, committee of the whole. I'll just read them. I move board approval. No, not consent. Fairview Parks and Rec contribution. I move board approval for the Fairview School District to contribute $9,000 to the Fairview Parks and Recreation Authority as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Bryant? Yes. Mr. Hague?
Yes.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Lyon?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Stillman?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. 180-900-990 resolution. I move the approval of the 180-900-990 resolution as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Lyon?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Stillman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Title IX resolution. I move board approval of the Title IX resolution as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Lyon?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Neal?
Yes.
Mrs. Stillman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Hague?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Capital projects purchase. I move board approval to purchase teacher desks and tables for the elementary school from various vendors at a cost of $1,812.01 to be paid from the capital projects fund as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Lyon?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Neal?
Yes.
Mrs. Stillman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Hague?
Yes.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Personnel matters. I move board approval of personnel matters as recommended and or read by the superintendent and as identified on the personnel list be approved and with the stipulation that the positions be filled only if the program or activity is to be conducted as determined by board action.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Neal?
Yes.
Mrs. Stillman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Hague?
Yes.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Lyon?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Thank you all for hanging in there and all your thoughtful words and comments this evening and your hard work.